can find you?
Thank you so much. My name is Lana McAra, and I am a published author. I'm a ghostwriter. That's how I make a living. I write books for people, and I am all over social media. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. That's kind of where I hang out because that's how I connect with people in my business. So.
Perfect. There's one area of social media that I've yet to master, and maybe you can help me. That's Twitter. I just can't make it work, but maybe after this, you can give me a few tips.
Twitter is kind of a puzzle to me, and I have my LinkedIn automatically posting to Twitter. That's all I know. Yeah.
So take us from the beginning of this, because we're going to talk about divorce and how you rebuild your life. So tell your story. How did you come across this group of people that you're helping as it pertains to the divorce that you went through?
Wow. I speak a lot on podcasts about this topic because I have a heart to help other people because I was so lost. I just felt like I was drowning and I didn't know how to get my feet back on solid ground again. And so I'm not a coach, like I would coach someone. I'm a book person, but I like to reach out to help people when I have the opportunity to do that. So that's where I'm coming from, a heart of compassion to help others. I found my way through, and you can too. But it takes a little bit of thought. It takes help. It's not a DIY project because people need each other. We all need each other. So that's one major thing. For me, I never thought I would ever be divorced. I was married for 30 years. Usually people think, oh, we made it to 20, we're good now. Oh, we made it to 30, we're good. And in year number 30, I left him. He was shocked, but I had been miserable for at least 20 years before I left him. So if there are any men listening, it would be a good time to say, if your wife tells you that she's unhappy, you might be smart to listen to her and find out why and see what can be corrected, because she may be able to stick it out for a long time, but eventually she won't be able to. And that's what happened with me. So, yeah, I never dreamed I would be divorced. And by the way, my husband is a pastor. He was a pastor. I was a pastor's wife who left her pastor husband. Now that caused a little storm in the church. But the truth is, there'd been a lot of storming going on at home for years before it went public. Because, the pastor's family has to be perfect. And so we all dressed up, pasted on a smile, but there's trouble underneath there, big trouble. And so it was unexpected. I was a stay-at-home mom, didn't have a job all those years. And so when I left him, I was more than 50 years old. I was 51 and a half, something like that. And 51 years old with no work resume for 30 years. How was I ever going to earn a living? If you look at the job market, someone in their 50s with no job resume, what was I going to do? And that's really how I woke up the next day and looked at my life and said, what am I going to do now?
And let me ask you, Lana, a question about that. There's people out there on the other side who may say, you've reached the 10-year mark. Many divorces don't make it 10 years. Sorry, many marriages don't make it 10 years because divorces seem to happen around that time, right? Like sometimes there's children, the children are old enough to understand, and we are a different person in our 20s and 30s than we are, let's say, in our late 30s and 40s, definitely, right? As we grow. And you made it to 30 years and you realize this isn't for me anymore because the last 20 of that 30, you were not happy, right? And there's other factors that, and there are factors that was contributing to that. How did you maintain this marriage when in year 10 you were not happy, but yet you continued forward 20 more years?
I had 7 children. That was really my big why. I had 7 children. I knew he was not the person who would support the family if he wasn't living there. And I couldn't support these kids on my own. I couldn't manage working with 7 children in the house. I was trapped. I felt trapped. A lot of the times I would push it away. It wasn't like the whole 20 years I was sitting there like, oh, I got to get out of here. No, I'd push it away, stick it in a box, put it over there. That was the kind of thing I did. We'd have a blow up and then I'd be like, God, what am I going to do? And then I'd sit down and, look at my options and I'd be like, no, can't do anything right now. And I'd put it in a box and put it away. And I didn't leave because I was angry. I actually left because of a conversation. That was a God moment, conversation I had with a friend of mine that I hadn't heard from in 20 years. It was someone that was very close to me when I was in my 20s. She was having children. I was having children. She had 8. I had 7. And so we were best friends. I mean, I would babysit her kids. She'd babysit mine. Who's going to babysit for 7 kids? I mean, you're just not going to go out and find a person. But our children were the same ages. And for them, it was play day. If she was watching my kids, they were having a great time. So, that was a friendship that I had that went deep. And then we moved. And then she moved. And I lost track of her. Over these 20 years, we both moved a few times. And I got this email. And it was from her, but it was like a group email, one of those newsy emails that people send out sometimes. It wasn't to me alone. But it came in. I was looking at my email and it came in. It was like 2 minutes old. And I thought, she's at home. So I looked in there and got her phone number and I called her up and she picked up. There was one other time I called her a few years before. She didn't pick up and I lost it. But this time she picked up. So we talked, her 8, my 7. That took a while. And then I said, I'm having some problems because my brother-in-law moved in and I just can't manage it. It's just like too much for me. My brother-in-law is here. And it was almost like my husband and his brother teamed up on me. And I couldn't get through it. There was nothing I could do. And she said to me, that's what's wrong with you. I've been wondering this whole time, what's wrong with you? She said, you're depressed. And I'm telling you something else. She was like giving me tough love here. She said, you're going to have a breakdown, girl. You're going to have a breakdown. I can hear it in your voice. You get out of there. And I was like, what? My friend was a very conservative Christian. And she just told me to leave my pastor husband. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. And I got off the phone and I sat down on the bed and I thought, oh my goodness. And I realized that I had been coping and coping and coping until I backed myself up in a corner and I couldn't back up anymore. I'd gone as far as I could go. And at that moment, I kind of had like a vision. It wasn't really like a vision, but it was like a picture in my head that came up. And I saw myself lying on the bed in a fetal position, all curled up, and I couldn't speak, like totally breakdown, right? And he came in the room and looked at me on the bed and said, "Are you going to get up and make dinner?" And when I didn't answer, he went out and shut the door. And in my spirit, I knew that's what was going to happen if I didn't leave. And so 3 days later, I left. It took me 3 days to get myself together to realize, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What am I going to take? What am I going to tell him? And, pull it all together. And I was bawling the whole time. I cried for 3 days. I still had 4 kids at home, but they were all over 18. They were young adults living at home. Nobody was still in school. And they were on their way. It wasn't like I was leaving toddlers, but hey, they're my kids. I not only left him, I left my 4 kids in that house. But I felt like I was escaping with my life. If I didn't do this, they were going to put me in the ground. So that was really, it came to a crisis moment. And he was so oblivious, that, well, I told him I'm going to see my sister and stay with her a while. I'm not doing well. I'm not handling things. I'm not coping well. My sister is a psychologist. And I was telling the truth. I went to my sister and my thought was, she'll help me find somebody. She'll help me find a therapist that can help me. And so I drove 12 hours, got to my sister's house that night. And I knew in my heart I was never going back, but I didn't tell him that at the time because I knew he would guilt trip me and I would never have the strength to leave. The only way I could have the strength was to not tell him right then. I told him later, a couple weeks later. So that was, my whole worldview shifted. I mean, how could God let that happen? That's what was in my mind. I was serving God all these 30 years. We were missionaries overseas. We served God and we helped people our whole lives. And here I am alone, basically kicked to the sidewalk, and I have to figure my life out now. So it was mind-blowing for me to find myself in that situation. I never wanted to be a wage earner and go to work. I was very happy being a stay-at-home mom, taking care of my family. That was my life. I was writing books, but that was my hobby. My family was my life.
So, Lana, let me ask you a question here in regards to that, because you mentioned some key terms. You mentioned that you felt trapped. You mentioned that you're coping with what you're going through. And anytime someone's in a relationship, these are characteristics of the relationship that they don't want to be going through, right? They don't want to feel like they're trapped in their marriage or in their relationship. They don't want to feel like they're coping with the person that they're dealing with. So a question that I would have for you, and before I ask this question, I just want everyone to know that to please subscribe, follow, and share this wonderful interview like the one we have with Lana today, so you guys can keep up with more amazing interviews like this. And we will be back for more.